So, continuing my catalogue marathon this afternoon is Dinky Toys number 10, and this dates from 1974. So this is nearly 50 years old. That's kind of scary. Okay. So one of the reasons I've been getting so many of these Dinky catalogues in particular is because I was trying to sort of work back and figure out when various toys sort of first came out, because some of the toys go on for years in Dinky catalogues. So for example, Eagles from Space 1999 have been going on for years and years, but I think I'm now at the point where they first come in, which is kind of what I was looking for. So this is catalogue number 10, all of 4 pence at the time. You can see there's a UFO interceptor on the front of it already, and interestingly, it starts sort of with a bit of sort of self-promotion about its own promotions. So look, a real Dinky bus. So it's an actual Dinky bus, which is quite funny because they obviously make Dinky bus toys as as toys as well, but they actually used this as a marketing ploy back in the 70s. So it's very, very clever. But again, it's the sort of thing that's completely gone these days. I mean, you'd never think of a toy company doing that these days. It just wouldn't happen, would it? It's sort of advertising kind of general Dinky features in the front of it. So immediately the tone of this one is quite different to the tone of other Dinky catalogues I've seen that were older, because the older ones were actually kind of more reserved than this. This one's being very up about itself, and maybe it's reflective of the strength of Dinky as a brand at this point in time, that it's it feels it can sort of do this. So let's move on and see what's actually in here. So you see here we're going right back to Joe 90 in the Jerry Anderson tie-in years, and I can't remember off the top of my head whether or not I've ever seen that in the Dinky catalogues I've looked at so far. I know that we've had Thunderbirds, we've definitely had the UFO Interceptor, that's been in there forever now, but I think we've got Straker's, is it Straker's car? Yeah, Ed Straker's car. I'm not quite sure if that kept going. The Interceptors definitely did. This was, I've been looking at Matchbox Battle Kings today, and I always used to substitute a Battle King for this, which is the Shadow 2 Mobile, and I never ever got a Shadow 2 Mobile, I don't think. I always ended up with the Battle Kings one. I'm also keeping an eye open at the moment for this blue Thunderbird 2, simply because it's blue. I have seen it in collectors' stores before now, but I've never picked one up because I always thought it was just like a daft oddity. But actually, you can see that this dates back from 74, if not earlier. So actually, getting one would be quite a nice thing to have from a sort of a completeness point of view. Also, nice examples there of the various Captain Scarlet vehicles, which again go back donkey's years. I mean, you see them all over the place, but in such widely varying states of repair that it's just not true. So it's kind of, you'd be doing well to find one in as pictured there, basically. Let's put it that way. But it looks like it does various things as it's going as well. There's some sort of indication here that it's got sort of action associated with it, as is Lady Penelope's Fab 1. And I'm not sure I've seen Lady Penelope's Fab 1 actually in the flesh, so to speak. And the interesting thing is when I think about it, about the Interceptors, is that every time I see these going on eBay, they're going for a good sort of 35 quid, but there seems to be a sort of a sub-market where people are painting them in white, because in the series they were white, and people are actually obviously taking the original examples of them and painting them up and then reselling that, and those in and of themselves are going for quite decent money, even though sort of repaints. But I can see why you go for it, because if you wanted to show accurate one, that would be a really good way to get one. Now this really made me chuckle. One of my very early childhood memories is of the Pink Panther cartoon, but the Pink Panther cartoon starts with a live action sequence, and the live action sequence actually features this car. as a real car, out of which the driver releases the Pink Panther in cartoon form. So it's ingrained on my memory, and I had no idea that Dinky had done a version of it. I say, ironically, that isn't how it is in the actual series, because the Pink Panther doesn't drive the car. I think a boy drove the car, because I always remember the boy taking his helmet off before he opened the side doors to let the Pink Panther out. So I laughed when I saw that. It was just great. That lunar roving vehicle I've seen before, and I think that then became a Zygon war chariot in later years, I think. It's certainly very reminiscent of one, if it wasn't that exact model that got reused. But all of these are not ones that I'm familiar with from the later catalogues that I've looked at. I've kind of been going backwards in time, I suppose, that's not the best way to do it. But so that hovercraft and that train set and that purple beach buggy, I don't know if that's from a series or what, but don't recognise any of those. So from my point of view, at least, they are genuinely new in the 74 catalogue, and indeed the beach buggy did say new next to it. Various cars here, nice Beetle top left. I think it were quite early to this as a concept, because if you look, all of these diagrams underneath them suggest that they all have a sort of opening bonnet and doors and so on. And Dinky were quite early to do that, because others did eventually do that, but it took them a while. That Fiat Abarth, this one here, that still rings a bell with me, because I have this feeling that I had one of those, even when I was quite little. But I think it was the silvery one, so I'm not sure if that was Dinky or something else, but similar. So a whole range of different ones there, McLarens and so on there. It's a sort of standard Dinky mix of good solid die-cast toys. That's perhaps a larger range of buses than I've seen them do in the later catalogues as well. Maybe they went out of vogue a little bit, but as I say, this is quite a thick catalogue compared to some of them. I think this might well be sort of peak Dinky in many respects, if I were to guess. This is a pickup truck. I do sort of remember, well, tow truck. We call them tow trucks in Britain. Americans call them pickup trucks. So I've sort of inherited the American phrase there. And this fire engine top right rings a vague bell as well. Can't quite. That ladder looks. Yeah, I could have had that. Maybe. This Ghostbusters. I always call it the Ghostbusters hearse, but it's obviously intended to be an ambulance. But that has been in the catalogue forever. Right up until probably the very last ones I've had a look at. It's always been around. It's just perpetual, it seems. Same for some of these as well. I'm pretty sure these have been around for donkey's ears as well. But again, more artwork in these catalogues. So I mean, they've used a whole page just for artwork, which the later catalogues don't do. Yeah, there's quite a lot of agricultural equipment and stuff in there. None of that I had. I think the SO tanker I always have a think about, but that one's older than any ones that I might have had, I think, in terms of its styling, so didn't have any of those, I don't think. Military Might, and again, now that reminds me of the, those old sort of war comics you used to be able to buy, newsagents, that were literally just about war. that was all that was in them. That very much reminds me of the front cover of one of those, but it was the same artist involved. And here, of course, we have the Dinky Toys Catalogue listing, which I think was it a Corgi? Or was it Matchbox that had something similar? One of their catalogues had a very similar approach, so you could kind of tick off what you've got. But this one is very small print compared to some of the other examples I've shown on other catalogues. So if you were to have a look at that, you'd probably get a really good idea of the sort of the full range that was available at the time this one came out. And it does look very extensive compared to some of the later catalogues, where I guess the range was, you know, inevitably shrinking. So that's interesting. So you can fire one missile at a time from the Striker anti-tank vehicle, or all 5, which is impressive. And the Leopard tank has obviously got a full range of motion on its turrets, which is kind of what you'd hope for. So I mean, tanks clearly still very, very sort of prevalent. You know, no qualms about going sort of full military for Dinky. It's always had quite a heavy sort of military element to its catalogues, one way or another. And quite a few German. I think these are. Oh no, these look to be American actually. So various pieces of hardware there. Oh, an RAF rescue boat. That's interesting. It does give you quite an interesting insight into some of the items of hardware that were around at the time, really, because these probably are modelled quite accurately after, you know, sort of real life vehicles of the time. Some military hovercrafts there, and British ones those as well, rather than being American. Oh yes, now this I thought was interesting. So this is the Sepcat Jaguar. Yeah, so it's not. I was going to say it was a Tornado, but it isn't. But. Yeah, now I can't remember if I've seen this before, but 729, which is this one, is just titled Multi-Role Combat Aircraft. Now, I think that's a Tornado. But I'm not sure if it was so early in this catalogue and in the Tornado's life that it didn't have an official designation at this point. So swing wings linked to retracting undercarriage, which I would have appreciated, because I like ones that have got retracting undercarriage to get them out of the way when you're flying them. But I think that was a Tornado, if I were to guess. Maybe it could be an F-111, but I think it's too small to be an F-111, judging by the size of its cockpit. So I think that was a Tornado, but they hadn't named it yet. That's what I reckon. Please do fight me in the comments on that one, because I would actually be genuinely interested to understand if that was the case. I'm not sure when the Tornadoes were brought in. So we've got a Harrier jump jet and a Bell helicopter on the right hand side. Neither of which are the actual images of the actual models, it seems. They're just kind of artist representations, which is interesting in a toy catalogue, because you think they'd actually be showing off photos of the real thing. Motor driven propellers even. They could be quite vicious, I imagine, if you weren't careful. So nice selection though. But I mean, you know, sort of, I think the die-cast wings are potentially pretty nasty. You don't want to get caught with one of those at speed, because they will cut you. There's no two ways about it. So we've got F4 Phantoms. Those are Sea Kings there as well. So these I have seen before. So these obviously came in quite early and kept going basically. The Dinky kits though are quite extensive here. That's quite a lot of kits. Various sort of planes and trucks and cars and lunar roving vehicle. 22 kits apparently at that point. No glue required was a bonus. And of course Meccano, because Dinky were Meccano. Meccano owned Dinky. So that's why you have this sort of section in the back of the catalogue for Meccano, because it's not sort of a tie-up with Meccano. Meccano owned Dinky. It's that way round rather than any other way round. And you've got the sort of plastic Meccano, which is perhaps less vicious, and Meccano Various. Can't say I was ever particularly into it. Maybe some friends of mine had the plastic stuff, I'm not sure, but I don't think I ever particularly owned it. I was definitely into my Lego from early doors. So, and they had these Mogul big steel toys. I remember these being in some of the earlier Dinky catalogues that I've looked at, but again these sort of faded away over time. More Mogul. I mean, I'm sure they probably lasted. I'm sure you could probably find examples of these because they will just be hunks of metal. You know, there's no two ways about it. But they're probably not child friendly enough for later years. And then Dinky 125 scale models there, so presumably slightly bigger ones. So that was number 10. And now we get into number 11. And what was interesting about that for me was that there was no eagle in that catalogue. So I think number 11 is the first time we are going to see the eagle mentioned as a Dinky toy. Which doesn't surprise me because the timing would be pretty much right. And this one should be the 75 catalogue. So if we look on the back there, if I can get it to focus in a little bit better. 1975 Meccano Limited Liverpool. So that is definitely this is definitely the 75 catalogue now, and this I think is where we see a slight shift in terms of how they're advertising themselves. You can see interestingly that Mogul is mentioned on the back there as well. Mogul and Meccano alongside each other there at the back. So let's have a look through this one, and you notice it's jumped up by a whole pence. That's 25% inflation. That, kids, it's you know, that's significant. And here we are. So new for autumn 75. There we are, from Jerry Anderson's TV series Space 1999. And this is then I have an example of this one. And the other really interesting thing about this one for me is that the RCS thruster quad here is yellow. On later models it was red. On this one it's yellow, and I've got a yellow version sat about 5 foot above my head at the moment. And although it's not as obvious from this picture, these would have the silver engine bells, reaction bells at the back, rather than red plastic ones. And in fact you can tell that from this, because the engines on the transporter pod there are silver, not red. And so that will then tie into the ones at the back as well. And again, that's the example of the one that I've got, and it's set 359. So these were sold initially in a sort of a horizontal base with a see-through plastic top to it, so you could very clearly see the model, which is a really nice way to display it. Later they came in more conventional boxes that could be sort of perhaps stacked more easily, but at this point in time it was very sort of clear packaging for it, and it was really nice packaging, of which I have an example. So well, I had both the green and the white, but I had slightly later versions, so the ones that I remember had red engines. So I was kind of confused when I picked up one that had the yellow RCS and the silver engine bells, because I didn't recognise it. But that is the early version. So the only downside to the one I've got is that I lack these red stripes. There are little vestiges of red stripes on my transporter's pod, but not the actual thing. And I'm interested by the lack of coloration on these canisters as well. The sort of the nuclear waste canisters, because normally they are yellow and red, I think that's right. But I'm guessing that's just pre-application of colour to them. But you can see here they've got this sort of the rotating sort of, you know, storage area for them, where you can sort of move them around and then attach them to a magnet, and they get lowered down as per this bit. But I had this one as well, and ironically in the show, of course, there were never any coloured eagles. And so why they went for a green one, I have no idea. But actually they were all white. They were always white. And the pods were always white as well. They didn't have any of this red malarkey on the freighter pod and so on. So it's all a little bit, you know, it's not really show accurate. Although personally, I think that they're not a bad representation of eagles at all. You know, I think purists might disagree with me, but actually I always thought they were pretty decent. And the legs are sprung as well, so the legs actually can absorb shocks, which I thought was a nice touch to them as well. And you can detach the pods. So there's immediately play value, because you can actually change the pods between eagles, which is, you know, a nice thought. So let's move on then. Let's see what else is new in this one. So we've got we've still got all the Jerry Anderson tie-ins here. So we've got the UFO tie-ins on the left-hand side, and we've got the Thunderbirds, and we've still got the Joe 90 in here as well. So although we've moved on a year, the Joe 90 is still current in this catalogue, and you can see that the Thunderbird 2 is still very blue. Interestingly, it says redesigned on it. So I wonder in what way redesigned. It looks like a darker blue than the one that was in the previous catalogue that we were just looking at, which is interesting. I'm just turning back to that one. Well, actually, it might be the same sort of blue. I've no idea in what way it's been redesigned otherwise. Whether perhaps they've made the legs a little bit stockier or something, I don't know. But that looks more like I can't tell if that's a drawing or a picture of it. But anyway, so the Captain Scarlet toy seems to have been cut back a little bit there because only the SPV is represented. So unless there's a page over the way here, has got more Captain Scarlet. No more Captain Scarlet toys. It's interesting. But the Pink Panther's got a little bit more of an advert going. And we've also got the Beach Buggies had some sort of makeover and it's a different colour now. But I don't know if that's a Beach Buggy from the Pink Panther, or if it just happens to be on the same page. Not overly clear. And then obviously on the right hand side we're getting into the sort of more normal car range again. Buses various. So the buses are still there. And they're still quite numerous actually. So what else? So we've got the fire engines and all the other good stuff that we had before. So again, we've got this sort of redesigned sticker on them. But what that actually means, in real terms, I have no idea. But it implies there might be some variance to them, perhaps, if you were, sort of being an utter completist about them. So dumper trucks. So still doing the full page pictures. Interestingly, because as I say, the later catalogues don't really go in for that. So they're still being quite generous with their catalogue design, I think, giving them full pages to work with without actually selling specific models as such. They're continuing to go into quite a lot of detail about what they actually do and how they do it, sort of down on the left hand side there. Because I think Dinky were always very upfront about that. They really wanted you to know what it was you were going to be getting and what it could do. Because I think for them, the features in that respect were part of the selling of it to you. So again, we've got another sort of comic style full colour page there, but they definitely drop out. Don't remember seeing anything like that in the slightly later catalogues from slightly later years. I mean, I would say even the year after this, you don't see that anymore. So they must have started scaling back, I think, after this. Firepower on a big scale to match, apparently. So these would all have been quite large, chunky toys for the kids of the day to play with. Strange thing in a sense, because these were all sort of like 30 years on, but we were still in Cold War territory at this point, so it's quite understandable. So again, they're selling the same sort of features as the previous catalogue was, but they're just using slightly different graphics for it, basically. And then again, we get into the sort of Dinky Toys Catalogue page, so you can do your checklist of what you've got and what you need. And again, it's still a very, very long, small print sort of detail of what you can get. There's very, very full sides in terms of what's available. But as I said before, I mean, a lot of these things keep going down the years. So, you didn't have to be in any sort of mad rush to collect these things. It wasn't sort of artificial scarcity because they kept on producing them for a very, very long time, really, as compared to what we might expect these days. So quite a few boats with firing missiles and so on, or torpedoes perhaps more appropriately. Good old-fashioned army vehicles. And this is still only called a multi-role combat aircraft, so they still haven't named it. But that's got to be a Panavia Tornado, surely. I would have thought so. But the Sepcat Jaguar is still in there as well, because that was a British mainline jet for a number of years. Yeah, so we've seen these before. We've seen the motor-driven propellers before, and cap-firing bombs and so on, and the Harriers. Standoff missiles actually fire, apparently. I'm sure they didn't take out any eyes in the process. Yeah, Bell helicopters and the Sea Kings are still there as well, so that's all, we've seen all those before. A couple more with motor-driven propellers. These are the guys that were on the back page of the previous catalogue. Now 23 fabulous kits rather than 22 before, possibly slightly different. Interestingly, the Sepcat and the multi-role combat aircraft are there as kits. Now I wonder if they're actually, were the previous examples of them actually kits as well, or is there just an option to have them as a kit, I wonder? It's not entirely clear to me. Dinky military kits. Primo, which is another Meccano sub-brand. Probably the sort of thing you would have had in kindergarten, I imagine, back in the day. Meccano as versatile as you. Accessories, kits, pocket Meccano. All good stuff. As I say, not something I ever got into. Meccano multi-kits. Yes, I've seen those advertised in the later catalogues, definitely. So they definitely helped, stayed around. Plastic Meccano again. There's a plastic Meccano obviously held on for quite a while as well. And the Mogul Steel toys are obviously still active here as well. I'm pretty sure I've seen those in later catalogues as well, so they must have kept going until late 70s at least, I would say. So we're only mid 70s here, so this is still well before plastic toys were really becoming more commonplace. So, you know, this is very much the era of die-cast still at this point. Quite a wide range of Mogul stuff there. Looks to me that they sort of remind me of sandpit toys, you know, just from the sort of the size and the kind of ground clearance they've got. That's what they remind me of, I think. So that's that. Look out for the real Mogul Wagen, an exciting life-size working model. Well, such fun. So there we are. So I'm not really proposing to get any more Dinky Toys catalogues now, because I've kind of figured out where the Eagles arrived, and the reason I got that one was because I was trying to figure out when the Eagles engines changed and stopped being the yellow RCS thrusters and the silver bells, and it does seem that that is the earliest version of them, basically. So once they were in the catalogue actually represents them exactly as they were produced on the first production runs, having the yellow RCS thrusters and the silver bells. And I was just interested to see when they first appeared in the catalogue looking like that. So that, I think, concludes my mega catalogue run for the day. So, and I've got a grand total of 3 videos for people to have a look at from today, as well as a streaming attempt. So whilst I still have some voice left, I shall say goodbye and best wishes for 2023. Cheers for now.